Hi, everybody. I wanted to share some of my thoughts on Pluto in Capricorn, as Pluto has backed up into Capricorn for the first time since the 23rd of March, 2023, where it's been in Aquarius. So, for those of you who have 0 degrees or up to 2 degrees of the fixed signs, especially Aquarius and Leo, but also Taurus and Scorpio, you've been highly impacted by these last couple of months, 3 months of this transit, on top of the fact that the nodes have been at that degree point as well for many of you. So it's definitely been an intense time for fixed signs. We even had a fixed grand cross because of Pluto being at 0 degrees of Aquarius for so long, at the same time as the nodes are creeping up. And then we had Jupiter entering into Taurus at 0 degrees. And so that was quite intense. Around the first week of June, maybe even the last week of May, you will have been feeling that for those of you who have those specific degree points. Now the cardinal signs are being strongly affected. So that's Capricorn, Cancer, and Aries and Libra. And this is going to be even more so after July, because then the nodes shift into Aries and Libra again. So North Node at 29-degree Aries is going to activate all of this, as well as the eclipse that we had on the 20th of April at that degree point. So we're looking back. We're looking back over the last 7 or 8 months of can we call it progress? I don't know. Chaos? Yeah, for sure. This probably is not only reflected in your own lives, but we can absolutely see that in the world around us. So what we want to look for is how we can move our way through that consciously. So just because chaos is happening in the world doesn't mean that we have to be negatively affected or even having a bad time. Many people have great success, great good fortune, great love during periods of the utmost turmoil. This is history. This is human history. This is not the first time in this rodeo for human beings. We have so many ancestors that have gone through incredible tumult and incredible periods of transformation and difficulty. And it's because they survived that we're here. If you're listening to me right now, it's because your ancestors had the resilience and courage and strength to overcome, which I'm going to assume you do too. So we want to be careful about losing our power. This is Pluto, especially in Capricorn. Who's your daddy? Who's got power over you? And be careful that you're not becoming really scared about what's going on, or freaking out in terms of what to expect. This is really unhelpful because it means that you're bypassing an opportunity to grow, bypassing an opportunity to find your own courage and strength, which is what Pluto is trying to teach us. Okay, so anytime you feel yourself saying, oh, this is really scary, or this really bothers me, or this is something I can't stand, it's know that that's a resistance. That's a resistance to your own development. It's a resistance to your own life as it's happening. So please give yourself some time and space to feel whatever emotions are there, but don't believe your emotions. Don't believe every thought you think. This is one of the most important aspects of understanding who we are, is we are not the mind. We are so much bigger than the mind. And the mind will just keep spewing all kinds of ideas at us, and perhaps even interrupt our own capacity to grow and to understand the truth of our nature. So this is definitely what Pluto wants for us. So don't think of any of this as punishment. I definitely see this as an opportunity for personal growth, and we only grow through discomfort. Whether you're having growing pains because you're 7 years old, or whether you're giving birth to a new project or a new baby, you're going to have pain. It's not going to be easy, and that's the only way we grow. That's just the way it goes. So you want to learn to understand the difference between suffering and pain. The suffering comes from our attitude to what is difficult. That's really what it boils down to. And once you've understood that, you've mastered the lesson of Saturn as well. So Saturn is ruling Pluto, both while it's in Aquarius as well as while it's in Capricorn. And Saturn is also going retrograde. So we've got Pluto going retrograde on the 11th of June and staying retrograde. Let me just be sure I'm not saying nonsense here, till the 10th or even the 11th of October, depending on where you are. I tend to go with universal time. So when I give you a reference to dates, think of it in terms of universal time and then adjust accordingly for your region. But let's say, for example, in In countries like in North America or South America, it'll be the 11th that Pluto will go direct again. And this, by the way, also covers the area that Pluto has already been since last December. And so keep in mind that even though there seems to be some new, whatever, chaos or fear or pressure to be afraid in the air, this is stuff that we've already covered over the last 7 months. So keep in mind, all of these things are we're building resilience. They're building a feeling of can do, a feeling of capacity for your human nature, and it requires a certain amount of courage for sure, but it also requires a lot of discernment. So you're careful who you believe, and you're careful who you trust. That's another Pluto word. And you're careful who you give credence to. Not everybody has an equal weight in terms of opinions, I'm afraid. And we've grown into, especially with Pluto and Capricorn, we've grown into this crazy culture of actors and just people who are famous for being famous being authorities on things that are actually quite important. So be careful who you trust, be careful who's getting paid to tell you what they're saying, or who's at least benefiting somehow to say the things that they're saying. And this is both the guidance of Saturn, who's ruling this Pluto, as well as Pluto itself. So particularly Pluto when it's in Capricorn. So Saturn is going retrograde, getting back to that point, on the 17th of June. And so it's also going to be retrograde until the 4th of November. So basically, the period of the Pluto in Capricorn phase is going to be governed by Saturn, which is mostly retrograde. Saturn, well, all retrograde planets are stronger when they're retrograde. They don't, it's not like they do things in reverse or that they mess things up necessarily. It's stronger because actually the planet is closer to the Earth. So keep that in mind too, that a retrograde planet will require more of your attention, not less. Um, at the very least, you want to be aware of where you're overcoming something that already was that you were trying to learn. So what was it that you were trying to learn? What was it that you were trying to master, especially with Saturn? What was it that you were trying to transform, especially with Pluto, but Saturn too? Saturn is all about your relationship to time. It's the Lord of time, the Lord of karma, and therefore the Lord of death as well. So Saturn, before Pluto was discovered, was all the things that we attribute to Pluto now. So we're getting a double whammy of this, especially as Saturn is very powerful when it's ruling Pluto. And the fact that Saturn is retrograde at the kind of the same time period, it's going to bring back some hard lessons. And I think those particularly strongly for anyone with the 27 to 29 degrees of cardinal signs. Remember, that's Capricorn, Cancer, and Libra and Aries. That's going to be something that we're going to have to be on our toes for. Just to give you an example, for myself, I have a 29-degree Cancer rising. And when Pluto crossed over, literally to the moment that Pluto crossed over my 29-degree descendant, I started a relationship with somebody that was extremely intense and over within about 5 weeks. It was amazing that in terms of what seemed to be the perfect relationship, and yet it showed me in a really clear and succinct and possibly even brutal way how I give too much of myself away in terms of relationships or in terms of other people's needs. And so this was a wonderful lesson, not my ideal outcome for sure, but a great outcome from the point of view of me as an individual growing through my life. So I saw in a crystallized form this whole new way of realizing that what I had thought I had mastered by the time that Pluto had gone through my seventh house, because Pluto is my seventh house, sorry, Capricorn is my seventh house, that I thought I had overcome and mastered this. And in fact, I really needed to learn that lesson again. So I think I've learned it now. Keep you informed if anything changes there. But this was really a big lesson for me. And so I'm really grateful for the experience having been extremely short, because I had a visceral reaction to what was going on that reminded me of what had been going on really 14, 15 years ago. What happened 14, 15 years ago? Pluto entered my seventh house. So those of you Leos, for example, who have Pluto going through your seventh, You can also ask that question: who has power over me? Where do I give away my power? Of course, that is the big question of Pluto anyway. Um, but particularly so when we're talking about the person who sits across the table from you. So keep these things uppermost in mind as you're going through your own transformation. Where can I gain in courage and strength and knowledge, self awareness, and not where can I start becoming afraid and roll over and allow others to take over my decision making power or my sense of self. Okay, this is the big lesson of Pluto in general. Pluto in Capricorn is who is an authority over me? Can I live through my own authority? Mm, So this is growing up stuff, right? This is Saturn messages all the way through. Capricorn, of course, being ruled by Pluto, and so is Aquarius. So we've got these big Saturn lessons coming 2 more decades down the pipeline, and with Saturn now very strong and ruling a retrograde Pluto at the same time, we're also trying to master something, recover, review things that we have understood since the 7th of March of 2023. So there's a lot going on in our personal lives that has to also somehow make sense in the context of our social lives, our collective lives, which in many ways, if you're paying attention, does not make a whole lot of sense. Makes sense on one level, but does not make a whole lot of sense on the level of wanting the best for humanity, for example. And so when we look at these lessons, go back for those of you especially who have anywhere from, I would say, 28 degrees of Aquarius all the way through till 9 degrees of Pisces. You will be feeling these movements of Saturn all the way through 2023. And then Saturn only gets back to that 7 degree point when it finally goes direct as of the 4th of November. It's going to cover all of those 7 degrees again on the 7th of February. That's a lot of sevens, right? So we had the 7th of March when Saturn moved in, and 7th of February when Saturn gets beyond the 7 degree point. So for those of you who love numerology, for example, what is seven? Seven represents teaching, deep understanding, asking the right questions. That's actually deeply symbolic right now. How to know what's going on by asking the right questions. Don't stick your head in the sand. Many of you often tell me, I don't watch the news. I don't want to know what's going on. It's a drag. It's an energetic burden. Well, then you really need to question what will happen when something really goes wrong. Who can we say is responsible when something very, very big goes wrong? And we have chosen not to know about what's going on. So, for example, if you've ever asked the question, how did the Holocaust ever happen? Well, it's because a lot of well meaning Germans didn't want to know, didn't ask questions, didn't want to get involved. And that's the simple truth. We have to get involved in the world around us because we are in the world around us. Of course, there's a degree of involvement. We don't all have to become political leaders, thank God, nor do we have to become, people who are engaged on every single level of human interaction. But we need to be involved in our social progress in some way or another. Otherwise, this is just taking the easy road out and even the selfish road out, which is all about me and my personal growth, my personal comfort. Then, if your focus is always about personal comfort, then you're going to find discomfort really, really hard to bear. That is where you start to lose the capacity to be resilient. Again, I come back to the lessons of Saturn. Saturn is all about that lesson. Pluto, too. It's about understanding propaganda, corruption, lies, deceit, finding out what is the truth of something. Again, it's who do you trust? Trust and fear are huge questions with regards to both Saturn and Pluto. And these are things that we need to learn over time in life, sometimes the hard way, and hopefully in a way that is very conscious and in a way that's very constructive. So please, don't bury your head in the sand. Don't let yourself think, well, this does not concern me. There's nothing in the world that is happening that does not concern us. This is what I find kind of funny about the plutocrats, mm, the rich people, the very powerful people who are all trying to ship themselves off to Mars or some other place, maybe New Zealand on some random ranch that's thousands of miles away from anything. But they're not actually. We can't, we're human. We are a product of the earth. We are earthlings, and there's no way we can survive on any other planet than Earth. We are literally a chunk of the earth in physical form moving around it. And thanks to the earth, thanks to nothing more than this earth that we walk on and abuse, which is why our health is also abused and so bad as well. So we can't escape. There's nowhere we can go. We have to be here now in this lifetime and fully embracing what's going on. And I promise you, this is the hard part, but this is a hard one, knowledge that I have, that you will grow and understand life more through facing the adversity, through really just looking at it and going right through it, than if you try and deny it and make it feel better, pretend it's not happening and make it feel better. It just doesn't work like that, I'm afraid. And these are the big lessons of Pluto and Saturn. So we've had, we've asking the important questions, really, really huge right now. And that includes, of course, yourself. What important questions do I need to ask myself? Perhaps, for example, like, what am I avoiding? What am I afraid of? What am I absolutely afraid of? Of course, the ultimate fear being death, coming back to Saturn and Pluto for that matter, Pluto being the lord of the underworld. And so we want to look at the last 15 years of our personal transformation, because at the very beginning of a sign, 0 degrees, and at the very end of a sign, 29 degrees, these are what we call the critical degrees. And these are where we find the most intensity. So we're in for 2 years of real intensity here. And there's going to be economic consequences. There already are. There will certainly be political consequences. There already are. Just thinking about Boris Johnson, for example, in the UK, the former prime minister who's just passed his Saturn return. For the first time, he's going to get the next one coming again in January. So watch for Boris in the news in January again. Hopefully, perhaps by after that period of time, we'll be done with him. So this is something that you're going to be seeing again and again in the news. People who are being shown for their incapacity, for their corruption, for their deception, for their lies. He's a walking embodiment of that, and equally, somebody like Donald Trump or Joe Biden, equally walking embodiments of lying for entire careers, decades and decades of that. All three of those people I've just named are on film, lying about themselves, lying about life, lying about their successes. And these things are starting to come up to the fore now. This is not a political statement. This is the truth. I don't get a vote in the UK or the US. This is simply obvious if you want to look. And this is, again, where do you want to look? Where are you afraid of looking? If a person's opinion or if a person's observation makes you feel emotional, just know that you're no longer using your discernment. Now you are being manipulated by your emotions, and this is why propaganda works. So Saturn and Pluto are everything except emotional. They're absolutely detached observers. Saturn has an aim for us to become wise through experience, but we can't discern the truth if we're emotional, if we're governed by our emotions and our preferences and what we'd rather think is true. That's the stuff of immaturity. It's the stuff of denial, really. So these are hard truths that we have to face. Our governments around the world, I can't think of one, are all corrupt and all really flailing. Canada, include that one. Australia, why not? Any other government you can think of, I'd say we'll find it. This is 15 years of the transformation of power that we've been going through. The financial crisis that was especially strong in 2007, 8, and 9, as Pluto moved into Capricorn for the first time, was not resolved. It was never resolved, actually. It was kind of papered over. It was sort of shoved down the cracks where people didn't want to notice anymore. Then Bitcoin entered the scene in 2009 as a solution to that financial crisis. And what are we seeing now at the end of Capricorn? We're seeing that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are being sidelined, being they're being pushed towards some kind of legal limbo, because the SEC, for example, uh, the uh, the Exchange Commission in Securities Exchange Commission in the U.S. Has cornered them in a legal limbo, which means that they can't actually be governed. Which means that whatever they do, it's neither legal nor illegal. But that means that the SEC can say they can't do it. And so this is a time where, while all of these solutions that were in principle a good idea in terms of overcoming a system that was clearly dysfunctional, they're all being pushed out by the same dysfunctional system. And if you pay attention, they're being replaced by new dysfunctional systems, like, for example, government run cryptocurrencies. And so we're having these digital currencies, for example, in the US coming up in July, and then in Europe, it'll be around October time. And these are supposed to be the solution. Well, be careful what the solution is that somebody's proposing to you and what is being gained or lost in that solution. These are really important things to pay attention to, because what seems like a convenience, think of Facebook, think of smartphones, actually becomes a really big noose around our neck at a certain point, and we have to pay attention to that. I'm just checking my notes here because I just went on a bit of a rampage, and I'm having to edit myself out for YouTube, not for you, but for YouTube. Um, yeah, this is a time of massive change for especially those degree points that I already mentioned. It's especially perhaps a time for big shifts in relationship, leaving a relationship, leaving a job, leaving a country, at least leaving your city or region. Again, new opportunities can only be found in new circumstances. You can't just kind of tweak things and expect your life to improve or benefit. And keep in mind your ancestors. Many people had their ancestors get up and go somewhere else to improve their lives. People are doing that even today, virtually everyone in around the world is the product of somebody who's had to move, whether it be from town to town or from region to region or country to country. Some people were moved involuntarily, and many of you watching will be amongst those people, whether you're Asian, South Asian, or African, originally. And so all of that ancestral power is in you, the capacity to pick up and go, pick up and change your life because you need to. Survival requires that of us. So if you're finding things difficult, no new jobs, no, because this is what's coming, the financial collapse is for sure coming. I'm not going to, this is my astrological assessment, but it's also based on expert assessment, not based on the mainstream news, which will tell you that many countries are not even in recession yet. They're beyond recession already. So when you need to change something financially or personally, it's time. It's time to really find the courage and pick up and go, start afresh. Tap into your resilience, tap into something that you can do and that you can offer society. This is important. Something that we offer to help other people will bring us security and will bring us success. And we're all here for each other. We're, like Ramdas says so beautifully, we are all just walking each other home. So think in terms of, what can I offer somebody else? Not to scam somebody, not to overtake somebody and overpower them and have control over them, but to really offer a service to somebody else. What can I do? There's something that each and every one of us can do. We just have to get out of the fear-based, selfish awareness of what's in it for me. This is part of the big problem that we've been experiencing globally. Everybody who has any means to change is all about themselves. Uh, big corporations or billionaires who have benefited from harming other people. What's in it for me? That's basically the driver. So find that resilience. Remember the ancestors. You're walking with your ancestors all the time. So find that and come to the next stage with them. We have to be vigilant during crises like this, whether it's personal or whether it's collective. And the collective crisis is happening, as I already mentioned. because our solutions to those crises, especially the Pluto-generated crises that we're experiencing currently, are going to be found in the Aquarius aspect of your chart and in Aquarius anyway, in general. And the collapse of old systems that we're responding to, the solution being Aquarius to the problem that was created in Capricorn. This is now something that we have to anticipate and also recognize may not necessarily be good for us individually or collectively. So slow down and start to think, what is really good for me? What do I need? What is the thing that I can benefit from right now without jumping ahead out of fear? And keep in mind, we're working on fear at the moment. We're going to always have to be in that framework of, how do I manage my own emotions? How do I manage my own fear? That again is always the message of Pluto and Saturn. Who's your daddy? Um, Yeah, I think, and this is the other thing that's happening too, which again, I'm going to have to be very careful here because people get very upset personally when their country or their government or their political party is even slightly questioned. So again, just remember, if you're emotionally triggered by anything that somebody says, uh, then you'd better check that, because you're very easy to manipulate if you're coming through emotions rather than coming through what is an open and curious observation of what is going on. Come from the place of discernment where there's no personal investment in your guy winning or in your team or in your country winning, and look at really what is happening with clear eyes. This is Saturn. So the majority of the world, meaning the literal majority, the world's population in majority, is finding its collective voice at the moment as well. I think this is a very strong reflection of Pluto moving into Aquarius, because we saw that accelerate all the way through the Pluto and Capricorn phase. We saw BRICS, for example, was founded in 2008. That BRICS means Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So South Africa landed later. First it was BRIC, then BRICS. And now 30 countries are wanting to join BRICS. That is an alternative to the G20 or the G7, which was quite abusive towards those countries, taking advantage again for corporate benefit. Corporatocracy, corporate interests running governments have been part of the toxicity of the last 15 years. Now, BRICS has come to the end of Capricorn into the beginning of Aquarius. I think Aquarius is going to show us where that new way of organizing regions and countries is going to flourish. And so 30 new countries adding to the original 5 is a pretty big influence. And these countries, most of which are former colonies or current colonies of corporatism and the corporate neo-colonial energy that is very, very strong around the world, American imperialism especially, they are rejecting it. And this is where the tables turn. So where the sort of Western model and the Western thought and Western ideas of superiority have been railroading basically much of the world for the last 250 years, especially. We could even say in the last 500 years. So 2 Pluto cycles has been very powerful since the first explorers in 500 years ago. Now the rest of the world is going, we don't think so. No, 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 we're not doing that anymore. And so the same forces that have been eviscerating those countries for decades, if not centuries, are also currently eviscerating their own countries. Keep this in mind. So what's going to happen is, because they weren't able to stop at destroying other governments, other economies, other people, and abusing them, they continue at home. And this means that now we're finding the consequences of infrastructure or governance or financial systems or even agricultural systems that are dysfunctional and not suiting the people in most countries, in many countries around the world. we're going to see those systems collapsing. And that starts with the financial collapse, which is already underway, which is accelerating now at these 29 and 0 degree points of Capricorn and Aquarius. But this is going to be spread around the world. So it is time to think of a new model. I'm not trying to frighten anybody, as I already said. This is about finding new solutions. This is about finding a whole new way. Voting whatever party you vote for, whatever two options you are given, then it's not going to change anything. Your vote really does not change anything. If you it's yeah, I'm not going to go down that way. So just to say that you really want to think in terms of what can you personally find in your life that will build resilience, build strength, build courage. We're covering old territory. You've already been here. It's not like you're not sure where you're going with these retrogrades. You're going back over old territory. You've already been here for the last 7 months, more strongly for the last 3 months with Saturn. And this is much of the theme that we're going to encounter right through till January. Okay, so Pluto will go back into Aquarius on the 21st or 24th of January. Let me double check that. So I'm giving you the right dates. Not even 20th of January. So the 20th of January, 2024, Pluto will be back in Aquarius till the 1st of September, 2024. And keeping in mind that Saturn is retrograde until the 4th of November, but then retracing its steps till the 7th of February. So you see how this period between now and the beginning of February is mirroring the intensity of the last 6 months. I mean, it's really hard to overstate how important these moments in time are for our personal transformation. We might feel like we're kind of stagnant and stuck in time. It might feel like things are not evolving, but things are going full speed ahead, even in the period of retrogrades. So think big, think out of the box, think long term, think spiritually, think in terms of the truth of our nature, which is that we are all interconnected. And if you have this sense that you have an enemy, you are suffering. You're the one suffering. Think of that. If you're angry or hateful towards somebody, that is like poison that you're drinking. This is true on a collective level as well as an individual level. There are no enemies. They're just people who are doing stupid, harmful things. And those people we need to deal with, but that does not make them an enemy. We have to get rid of that dualistic way of thinking, this idea that somebody can be inherently evil. Evil is part of the mind. It's everybody has the capacity to be evil, and some people, when trying to point out evil, become evil themselves. So you become a victim of the thing that you're actually trying to eradicate. This is the way that goes too, and that's that old saying of when you point that finger of blame, you've got these three fingers pointing back at you. Do that every morning in the mirror. Point that finger of blame and let those three fingers remind you of where the source of all joy and all pain is. So we have an opportunity here to reflect on our own authority, who is an authority, who governs us, and how. This is a really major pivot point, a major change for people who are in cardinal signs and in fixed signs particularly. The mutable signs between especially 0 and 7 degrees or even 9 degrees because of that Saturn are also transforming. So you're not off the hook either, Pisces or Virgo or Sagittarius or Gemini. Doesn't leave many people, does it? But this is more intense at the moment because of that Pluto reversing back into Aquarius. We're all on the hook at this time. We're all there, and again, we're all in it together. It's not like you don't have these points somewhere in your chart, even if you don't have natal planets or degree points of, say, ascendant or midheaven in your chart that are being affected. So I feel like I've reached the point where I'm starting to ramble, so I'm going to end it here. I have a lot to say on this, a lot of which I feel uncomfortable saying on YouTube, partly because of YouTube, partly because the comment section becomes quite nasty at times. People are unable to hold a different opinion to their own. And I'm not even trying to convince anybody of my opinion. I'm just sharing it based on what I understand from my own work in international institutions over many years, my studies in international relations, and my work in astrology and what I understand through the astrology as well. And so this is definitely an opportunity for us to grow collectively towards a way of understanding each other. This would be the best outcome for Pluto in Aquarius. We don't want to be at each other's throats. Um, Recently, somebody called my opinion stupid. It is it's just not even possible that somebody's opinion can be stupid. And I'm not just saying that in defense of myself, because I frankly don't care. But it's that an opinion is simply a perspective. It's somebody else's way of seeing the world. And this is something that particularly the Western world and particularly North Americans would benefit from understanding that you don't rule the world, that you have only one version of reality, yours, and that it is not the whole picture. And now we're seeing that the majority of the rest of the world is rising up and saying your way of seeing things doesn't work for us, at least if it ever did. I doubt that it ever did. And so we have the obligation, this is also Saturn, the humility to see that our opinion is only opinion, it's not truth. It is not the truth. So if you disagree with somebody's opinion, you also have to recognize, well, you're not holding the truth, you're holding your opinion in contrast to somebody else's. And that's an opportunity for you to realize, okay, this is just two different ways of seeing things. Now, when we enter into that Aries and Libra polarity very soon, 17th of July, as the North Node moves into Aries, then we're going to have a lot more of this butting of heads. We have an opportunity to recognize where it is we might need to compromise more to avoid literal self-destruction, because this is where we're headed. And where we need to also recognize that we have to choose our battles. Aries is ruled by Mars. Libra is ruled by Venus. It's about finding compromise, finding harmony, finding a way of working together without eradicating the other person. So when do we need to concede? When do we need to find humility? Saturn is all about learning mastery over oneself, over one's emotions. Saturn is the ultimate messenger of humility. It teaches us the hard lessons of life, which are humbling. If you haven't had your comeuppance yet, just wait for it. Saturn will be bringing it sooner or later if you're lucky enough to live a long life. I do wish you a long life. I do wish you a good degree of discernment and a good degree of pure dumb luck at this time as well, which one could also call karma, which is also ruled by Saturn, and having that grace, Guru's grace, and the grace of life itself bless you through whatever challenges you're facing. You're not alone. We're all facing challenges. It's a question of attitude. It's a question of where you place yourself physically on the map. With whom you do that, especially when the Aries Libra axis comes in, that'll be a big question as well. And what can you do to grow and learn? Like Nelson Mandela said, I never fail. I either succeed or I learn. Keep that in mind as Pluto is going through Capricorn again all the way through January 2024.